Hey there, Simone here with Bulletproof Business Growth. As always, with ideas and insights, what to pay attention to when you are growing and scaling your business. And of course, you know you can't do this by yourself, so that means you have to have an excellent team by your side who can help you do this. Now, speaking of team, business owners are discovering that employees are not quitting fast enough these days. I know this might kind of seem crazy, but what we've been finding is that zero attrition is actually not a good thing. And everybody might think I'm nuts because, well, I mean, what have we been fighting for in the last few years? Everybody still has a little PTSD from, the COVID years when the great resignation was stressing everybody to the max because employees were quitting in droves. But what's happening is employees are happier than ever, is what the statistics say. And a lot of that comes from people have been changing. So actually employers have been paying attention and they have been giving more freedom. So there's, it seems like the happiest people are the ones in hybrid models. But there's been a lot of changes that have been happening that are keeping more people in their seats than may be good. So at this point, it's time to let go of the employee scarcity and look at that turnover is actually very important for team quality. And I'll talk about a little bit more about later how to do that in a sustainable way. But basically what we want to look at is like a 10% turnover rate is considered a good rate. Some businesses who are in a high growth model are going as much as 20. And we'll talk later about why actually 20% may be something to strive for when you're in a place where you have to build that high performance team. So when we think about how you best go about having that 10 to 20% churn, quitting is actually, it's much better for you and for your team and for your culture and your morale when people quit. A lot of companies have been finding in this last year that they have had to do, that they had to fire a whole bunch of people at the same time or lay off a great amount of people because they were over budget and they couldn't afford to hold that many people at that level. And of course, that majorly messes with people's morale and the culture. So it's actually better to have a performance system in place that organically weeds people out. Because as you may have been hearing me say before, a company can never outgrow its people. So if you're in a place where you've grown quickly, but your people are at the same level, that now becomes your bottleneck. So the company can never outgrow its team. So when that happens, stagnation happens. So when you have a team that's gotten too comfortable, where people have been around for a long time, and don't get me wrong, there's plenty of people who have been with companies for a long time who are just naturally those grade A players who always have to grow, who always have to challenge themselves, who are always growing with the company, if not ahead of the company. There's plenty of people like that out there. And then there are plenty of people out there who don't do that, who, rest on their laurels, who at one point may have been high performers, but they're not necessarily now. So as for you as a business owner, it's very important that you keep track of where your people are on that level. So on that spectrum, who is knocking it out of the park, who's kind of in the middle, and who's at the bottom, and then we have to do something about it. Now, why turnover is important is like we have to make sure that we get in fresh perspectives, especially since anything concerning technology, things are growing so fast that it is super important to get people in who can lend new perspective, who have new information, who think differently. And also with those stagnant employees, comfort leaves, and we need to get the comfort out to drive a high performance team. So complacency happens when there's not constant renewal. And when we think about, innovation, where does innovation come from? It comes from constantly getting in new thoughts, constantly like driving people to always be at their best. And yes, we want to we want to keep people, but we also want to make sure that we only keep the best people. So when you think about what's one of the things that kills a budget, speaking of killing, it is when you have too many employees who are getting paid too much, but are not delivering at the level of their compensation. And that happens with high-level employees who have gotten too comfortable, too stagnant, too complacent, and who are not delivering at the level anymore that the company needs them to, because there's no such thing as coasting. There's no such thing as maintaining. If you as a company, you as a business owner, and your employees are not consistently growing, it means actually they're declining. So if you have anybody in any position who's making quite a bit of money, but they're not constantly updating their ability, their skill set, they're actually starting to cost you money. So that's one of the reasons for why turnover is actually important. It's also, as things are changing so much, market realities are that things are changing. So skill sets may no longer be the right fit for these roles that you have. So unless people are constantly training and upping their skill sets, their skill set may be outgrown. So we have to constantly optimize talent for the current requirements. And if that doesn't happen, roles and employees become misaligned. And when we have that happening, then everything just kind of goes down the hill, because now we can't deliver. It's kind of like a car trying to drive on three wheels. Doesn't work. So when you think about perpetual retention, what that costs a business, well, we have ever increasing labor costs. And when those labor costs and those benefits are not balanced with the gains they're actually producing, then we have a huge misalignment. So strategic pruning through moderate attrition is actually what we want to go for. And that means that optimizes expenses, that optimizes talent that aligns with economic conditions, and it makes sure that also aligns the culture. Because when you think about why do A players why would they want to work at your company? Well, excellence is going to be one of their drivers, and they only want to hang out with other excellence-driven people. So that's why we can't have anybody hanging out who are just kind of like mediocre B and C's. There should be never anybody on your team who's not at least a B plus, that we can coach, train, give the support that they need to up level to an A and get even better. So when you have zero churn, it means we lose opportunities to promote those great upcoming high performers, those really good people in your company. And when we don't have those opportunities, that means we lose people's motivation, because when you have excellent people, they want to grow. They want more responsibility. They want to learn more. So that means we have to be able to give them that. And if those seats are taken by stagnant, complacent people who've been just around for a long time, that doesn't help. So we can't really have great people who have a stalled career, because that means great people will quit. So that's part of the reason why we have to keep looking at who's still the right fit for the right seat, and who needs to be moved around in their seat, which is also quite possible. And then of course there's the other question, who needs to get off the bus. So of course, sudden turnover, as in layoffs and like mass firings, are very disruptive to the culture, as we have talked about. But as a small business, as I said in the beginning, 10% is about the churn rate. 10% a year is about the churn rate that you want to have to drive this constant evolution. And part of that is having proactive attrition, where it's a planned way of doing things, where you know that this is something where you are strategically reorganizing the team, as in move them around in their seats, get new people in, get some people off the bus. And that also really helps with financial health and engagement, because as we discussed before, you have to look at your budget for talent. Sometimes we have to let go of people who are not delivering at the level that they need to, and that of course allows you to rehire at different levels, and sometimes that means adjusting the team. And when we think about engagement, well, it also helps the current team to be more motivated, because they're realizing that they need to deliver at a higher level. So yes, we want stability, of course, and no, we don't want stability, because the stability also messes with people's ability to deliver. So when we manage attrition to avoid complacency, that means we're optimizing our most valuable assets, which are our people. And there's a common practice called top grading, which goes along the thinking that 20% of your people are A players, 60% are somewhere in the middle, and 20% are at the bottom. So I would always invite you to look at top grading every quarter. And the first time you do it, you're going to face probably a pretty interesting reality, because if you haven't really had strategic attrition, if you haven't been proactive about this, you may have quite a few people on your team who are no longer the right fit for the role, for the skill level needed, and you might have to do some house cleaning. So when you look at your lowest 20%, the most important thing, I'm not talking about fire everybody tomorrow, but the most important piece about that is that you want to start making a plan. And it's still true that finding the best people takes a bit longer. You want to make sure that you have that compelling, professionally crafted vision that helps them understand how they would fit into the company growth, what the strategy is that they would be basing their strategy on. If you don't have that in place, I would highly recommend you work on that. But that's one of your most important power tools for hiring, is being able to demonstrate that. So having that in place, having a really tight operational plan in place that helps everybody achieve what they need to achieve, those are kind of your biggest cornerstones. Now, when you know that you might have to replace 20% of your team, you want to make a hiring plan. And you want to make sure that you prioritize that hiring plan for what drives the most revenue. So we want to always replace those positions first, because of course cash flow is really important. So we have to keep optimizing those positions first. So looking at the 20% of the bottom, so now you've made a plan for how and when to replace them. And you might just do this a little more organically. You might go, okay, we're going to replace one person a quarter, whatever seems like is manageable for you. But on the other hand, I also want to encourage you to do this the fastest way you can, because the faster you replace those people, the faster you're going to get better people on board, and the faster you can move on. Now, when we're looking at the 60% in the middle, what your goal with them is to start separating them out. Because when you start setting really clear goals and expectations and really clear milestones, and you start demanding excellence, well, that'll divide the wheat from the chaff. And it's very important to do, because you want to look at, you might have great people on your team, but you haven't challenged them, you haven't given them the support, you haven't been giving them what they need to truly be excellent. And they may not even think that they're in that category because they have never been challenged that way. So as a leader, this is one of your highest priorities in your job, because this is where your most valuable assets can get a lot more valuable, and where you can also let go of a lot of weight and constriction that is actually not serving your company anymore. So looking at those 60%, it's important, like I said, really clear goals and expectations. So that means having a plan that everybody is working, and they have to be held accountable to that plan. So this is where you can start pushing performance. This is when you can start giving them more challenging goals. This is when you can cause some positive stress. And positive stress just means giving people challenges that will help them come up, get to a new level, do things they haven't done before, learn new stuff. So that, of course, is stressful, because now they're in a place where it's kind of uncomfortable. They're doing things they've never done before. They're hopefully making mistakes, because if they make mistakes, that means they're trying harder, they're striving harder than they've done before. And of course, they're going to mess up at some point. But this will also show you who will start showing up at a higher level, who is coachable, who loves growth, who wants to constantly get better. So who rises to the top? Because that's what we want to create here. We want to create a culture where we're consistently we're separating out the mid-level, helping the ones that are hungry and ready to go rise to the top, and everybody else, we want to start weeding them out, because they're going to drop to the bottom anyway. So we want to cause that process faster. So part of that means you always have to be hiring. And which is when I think about our clients, that's a lot of times one of their biggest bottlenecks, because so much is going on in the business anyway that it's not a practice to always be hiring. And what that means is you always have to make connections. You always have to be looking, because when you really need somebody, if you hit LinkedIn at that point, you're way too late. And then you're going to get those people who are not going to be your A players. So you want to make sure that you're always looking for those people who are excellent, who you can get recommended by somebody else tells you, hey, they would be a great fit for your company, because that means they're also pre-vetted. They're coming in with a story that is positive, and this is going to be much easier for you to make decisions about than somebody who just comes in from Glassdoor or whatever. So it's so important that as a business owner, you structure out time every single week to search for talent and make connections. You have to make that time. This should be one of those 1 or 2 hours a week that you carve out the time to connect with people, whether they're people you've already met, whether you're talking to somebody else and you're asking them, hey, who do you know who's amazing, who should be part of your company, our company? That's the question you should always be asking, so you don't have to look on those websites. You don't have to weed through hundreds of resumes, because suddenly you're hiring out of need and you're not prepared. So part of this top grading process that's also extremely valuable is it installs healthy fear into your team. And I'm talking about just the awareness that they're not replaceable. Just the awareness that their compensation is based on performance. So this really also creates somewhat of an internal competition, because as new people with higher levels of skill come in, your existing people get a little bit of a fire under their butts, and they actually have to kick in gear, and they have to keep up with the new norm. So these are all good, healthy practices that help people grow, and that's why they're part of your company. If you're a great leader, what you're looking at is, how can I always make my people grow? Because that means they're engaged, they're challenged, they're getting more valuable in their own job market. And of course, that means they're constantly providing more value for your company. So what we're looking for is always to keep striving to get better, to keep evolving, to keep growing, because all of that also cuts down on what so many people are complaining about right now. So many business owners are complaining that the employees they're hiring are entitled, are complicated, have too many requirements. So when you're setting up your company right, where this is not part of the culture, this is not part of the standard is excellent compensation for excellent performance. Now we have a company that has the right level of turnover, that has an excellent culture, and where everybody always keeps growing, creating amazing results for you. So I hope this helps. Think about what you need to do to get a really clear picture of where your team's at right now, and then just start making a plan and start working the plan. We have a brand new training out there. If you wanted to hear about this in more detail, go to bulletproofbusinessgrowth.com/leap, bulletproofbusinessgrowth.com/leap, and check out our new training. Have a great week.